What's up, sports fans? My name is lukasweese, host of the Weesesports Chronicles. On today's episode, I'm joined by Harman Dayal. He is a staff writer for the Athletic Vancouver, covering the Vancouver Canucks. In this episode, I chat with Harman about his journey into sports media, covering the Vancouver Canucks, this year's Vancouver Canucks team, the plethora of young talent, and where he thinks this team can go in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. The Weesports Chronicles is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So make sure to like, rate, watch, and subscribe to all three of those channels. I know it's been a while, but sit back and relax and enjoy this episode with Harman Dayal on the Weesports Chronicles. Well, the reason why I'm having you on is because, of course, hockey's back, which is obviously so exciting with, given everything that's going on right now to have hockey back. But the Vancouver Canucks in their 50th season as a franchise to be in the playoffs and to be producing, I think, the most exciting first round series against the St. Louis Blues. What's it been like to cover this team in such a strange season?
Yeah, it's been such an up and down year for the Canucks. Obviously, they came into the season. There was still anticipation, some sense of trying to figure out what this team was capable of. I think the big question going into the year was whether the team was good enough to make the playoffs or not. After some of the key acquisitions in the summer, like Tyler Myers, Michael Furland, and of course the most notable one, JT Miller. And those guys, Miller in particular, just seemed to gel right away. And Vancouver was off to such a hot start, and they hit a bit of a wall in November and December. But it was just a season for them marked by ups and downs. I mean, right before the pandemic hit, they were kind of sliding close to almost falling out of a playoff position. And so now you had the four and a half month layoff. Going into the play-in series against Minnesota, and then the Canucks just had a really convincing showing there against one of the NHL's better 5-on-5 teams to advance to St. Louis to play against the defending Cup champions. And then in this series, it's been absolutely phenomenal to see the way that Vancouver has stepped up to the occasion here. They've given the Blues a serious run for their money, obviously up 2-1 in the series, but just the fact that the two games that they have won, it's not even a case where they've been outplayed kind of on the ropes and it's been goaltending that's bailed them out. The team as a whole has really come alive. They're driving play, and I think they deserve to win the first couple of games. So it's setting up to be a really fascinating series. As you mentioned, one of the most exciting first-round matchups in the NHL right now. And for the Canucks, it's excellent for this market because first time making playoffs since 2015. It's been a long time since the city saw playoff hockey.
Well, and they haven't won a playoff series since their Stanley Cup final run in 2011. So for the fan base, it certainly is exciting. But when you just look, to me, Harman, at this team and this first round playoffs, you have no Connor McDavid, you have no Austin Matthews, no Sidney Crosby, but I think Bo Horvat's really established himself, and I look at him as not only just a fantastic offensive player, but a leader as well, and to me very deserved of the C on his jersey. What's his growth been like this year, and what have your thoughts been on his ability to raise his game in the playoffs thus far?
Absolutely. I mean, to touch on the latter point you mentioned, you look at Horvat's track record going back to juniors, 16 goals in 21 games for the London Knights to win OHL playoff MVP. In his first season as a rookie, it was 2015 when the Canucks played the Flames in the first round, and Horvat was just starting out. He was a fourth line center playing limited minutes, and he was the most dynamic forward on that team, and he put up 4 points in 6 games there, and that was another sign. And then to see him come alive in the playoffs now, last I checked, his 6 goals lead the NHL. You can clearly see an example of a player who raises his game when each contest matters the most, when the stakes are the highest, and that speaks volumes to why he has the C on his jersey. And when you look at his progression in his career arc, since entering the NHL, it's been an almost linear progression for him in terms of improvement. Every year since his rookie one, he's improved his point per game pace. His two-way game, his two-way profile has steadily sort of improved over time. And obviously over the last couple of years, he's taken on the mantle as the Canucks' number one matchup center. So just a ton of growth in his game over time, and absolutely deserving of that C when you consider the role that he has as a leader in that locker room. The guys really look up to him. And he's not the most vocal guy, but I mean, we hear that cliche of leading by example. And when I talk to guys on that team, they say, you can talk is cheap. It's the actions that back it up. And that's exactly what you get with Horvat in terms of his preparation. There's no one on that team who hates losing more than Horvat. He can be vocal when the team needs a bit of a kick in behind. Just a complete package and the absolute perfect center to have behind Elias Pettersson as the club's second-line center.
And speaking of Elias Pettersson, we saw that wicked shot of his that just, gets social media drooling. What's something about Elias Harman that many people may not know, but that just makes him such an interesting personality or player on this team?
Yeah, it's really interesting because what I've noticed in sort of being around him quite often and just watch his progression, he has a quiet intensity to him. It's one of those situations where I think people don't realize, like, they might look at this guy and say he's slim, small, slight. There were a lot of weight concerns when he was drafted. But you look at the way he's just competed in these playoffs, going into the dirty areas, winning puck battles below the boards, constantly moving away from the puck, and not getting frustrated at all by all the physical attention he's gotten. I mean, he's right up there among the points leaders with 9 or 10, and he's been shadowed the entire way, whether it's been against Minnesota or against St. Louis. And so for him to battle through that adversity, we hear about the playoffs just being this physical grind. And it's just how hard Pettersson is working away from the puck too. The full 200-foot defensive game. And I think it's those details that allow him to be so successful offensively, because he's driven in a way that I just don't see it in other athletes. It's kind of amazing. He's got this again, it's just kind of hard to explain if you're not around him every day. Just this quiet intensity that you can feel it when you're around him. When you enter the locker room after a game they've lost, he's stuck in his own mind, right? Like, just processing what he could have done better. And he's just someone who wants to rise to the occasion. I mean, we talked about Horvat. That exactly applies to Pettersson as well. And again, it's just the hard work away from the puck, his commitment to the defensive side of the game, and then just the fact that he doesn't back down physically. Like, he's a strong dude, despite what the narrative might lead you to believe about his weight and his size.
Well, I think you made a really interesting point about the play away from the puck, and I think that's what has impressed me about Vancouver in these first three games. Of course, as this episode's recording, Game 4 will be played Monday night, and when it's released, it'll be after Game 4. But just their ability to play from the puck, because St. Louis is a heavy team. They're looking to wear teams down and use their physicality to really dictate the play. But I've just been very impressed with how Vancouver's just been able to combat that with just their speed and skill, and as you said, just their ability to not be afraid to go into those dirty areas and make something happen.
For sure, and that's part of, I think, what Travis Green wants the identity of his team to be, not just the speed and skill aspect. And stylistically, I mean, you see the high-end talent on Vancouver's roster, but relative to a club like Vegas or Colorado, I actually think St. Louis matches up better for Vancouver stylistically, because when you look at these sort of heavy physical games where you have to earn every inch, I think that's actually, like, when Vancouver is engaged and emotionally and physically, I think that's actually when they play some of their better hockey relative to, again, if they played the Avalanche and they're trading chances back and forth, I don't think they necessarily have the depth, both up front and on the blue line, to sort of play that sort of quick strike game where you're trading chances with a powerhouse, especially when you look at Vancouver over the course of the regular season and you see their results and how they've kind of struggled to contain teams off the rush. I think these types of games against St. Louis suit the Canucks a lot better. And I think that's what you've seen so far through the first 3 games.
How big is this playoffs been for the growth of someone like Quinn Hughes? Because this is someone who's just a rookie. So this is just, he's just soaking this experience in like a sponge. We've already seen him make, a huge play with that bank pass in game 2, leading to Horvat's overtime goal. But it just seems to me, Harman, that he's just, his ability to just make, we know of his ability offensively, but he's getting better defensively. And I think, the size was obviously a concern with him coming into the league. But through the first 3 games that I've seen, he can, block a shot. He can make that right pass in his own zone. So what are your thoughts been on Quinn Hughes thus far?
He's been an absolute game changer for Vancouver since day one. And again, you talk about how Hughes' impact on the game transcends what he's able to produce offensively, because you even just look at the 5-on-5 numbers in the regular season. And the thing about Hughes is, because of his elite puck-moving ability, the team just spends almost no time in its defensive end. And when you talk about what's the best way to stop the opposition from scoring, well, it helps being 200 feet away from your defensive goal. So that's I think the way that Hughes is able to ironically defend so well is simply he doesn't spend time in his own end, and he makes it hard for the opposition to establish zone time. You see forecheckers. In game 3 was the first time I've ever seen him take a real big hit off the forecheck. He's just so elusive with his skating and his edge work that it's incredibly difficult to catch him, no matter how good of a team you are at tracking defensemen down and retrieving pucks in the offensive zone. And again, Hughes' ability to help transport the puck up the ice, it's almost like it doesn't matter what the other 9 skaters are doing on either side. He's just going to push play. You look at the scoring chances against rates, the shots against rates, they're very low relative to what you might expect. And I think that's been the key to his success. I think Travis Green has recognized that. And it's why since mid-November, Hughes has taken the mantle and played in that shutdown pairing role with Chris Tanev.
No, and that shutdown role has been very effective. And if you look at just the expected goals 5-on-5 with Hughes on the ice and without Hughes on the ice, it's clear when Hughes is on the ice, Vancouver, they're getting more scoring chances in those right areas compared to when he's off the ice. So you can't deny just his impact and what he's been able to do. And I just think that each game is he's just getting more and more experience, and it's just going to help him down the road.
Absolutely. And the thing about Hughes is, as a character, he's the one thing that's special about him is he is unflappable. He does not feel any pressure whatsoever. It doesn't matter what the stage is. He's going to play his game. He's going to take his chances. And I love his ability to rebound after he makes a mistake. The rare time when he might turn a puck over or make an ill-timed pinch, it doesn't rattle him. It doesn't. Hughes is always operating at 100% confidence, it seems, and he's never afraid to make a move. And I just look back at the first shift he had as an NHLer at the tail end of the 2018-19 season after signing out of the University of Michigan in a game against the LA Kings. First retrieval back, and he's got 2 forecheckers pressuring him behind the net. And instead of making the simple DDD pass to his defense partner, Luke Schenn at the time, he backhand sauced a pass over the forechecker stick to Adam Gaudette on the wing so the club could actually lead a controlled breakout. And that is, I think that personifies the type of character Hughes is, and why when we make the transition from the regular season to the playoffs, it doesn't matter for Hughes because it's just the same thing. he's never too high or low, and really it's that emotional maturity that he has that allows him to utilize his talent to the best of its ability.
What do you think the ceiling of this team is, Harman, this year? Because obviously it's such a unique circumstance, the pandemic, the bubble, but it sort of reminds me a bit of what the Leafs did a few years back when they faced Washington Capitals in that first round series, where it's a bunch of young guys. It's their first time in the playoff spotlight, but they're showing that they're fearless and they don't care about being the underdog, and they're just embracing that role and really it's showing in their results.
I think that's a perfect comparable, and I actually wrote a story a couple weeks ago now about exactly what you mentioned, the Canucks embracing that underdog mentality. I mean, again, going back to the start of the regular season, the consensus view was that Vancouver was unlikely to be a playoff team. And I think internally, the organization, top to bottom, knew about that narrative. And I don't necessarily think that there was a belief of, we want to prove people wrong, and they used it as fuel to motivate themselves. But I think there was a sentiment of, we want to show the league what we're capable of, and that's exactly what they've done to date. And when I look at their chances against St. Louis, if the first three games are any indication, they've got an excellent shot at winning this whole thing. And you never know what confidence can do to team, particularly when you've got Jacob Markstrom finding he's been the backbone of the team in the regular season. That form is carrying over. I mean, game 3, the Canucks, after a couple of strong opening performances, they kind of struggled at 5-on-5. They had a real tough time. They were up against it, and Markstrom really kept them in. They ended up being one shot away in OT, and so when you combine all of those factors, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, a lot of it's going to depend on if they do advance, who they end up playing against, because Vegas and Colorado, I think, are going to be like the difficulty scale is going to ramp up there stylistically because of, as I mentioned, Vancouver's play style and sort of how Colorado and Vegas would line up with the Canucks' strengths and weaknesses. But you can't. I think that you've reached a point where you can't underestimate what this group can accomplish, and we could be witnessing the start of a little bit of a Cinderella run. We'll see how it goes.
Well, hey, there hasn't been a Canadian team to make the Stanley Cup final since 2011 in the Vancouver Canucks, and one who have not won the Cup since '93. So, it would be very interesting if that were the case, and it would be a really cool storyline if Vancouver were to do it. But Harman, I want to shift gears and talk about your career, because you're someone that's done a lot for such a young person as you are in this industry already. I'm just curious, what got you into wanting to pursue a career in sports media?
Sorry, can you just repeat that question? The audio kind of cut off.
Yeah, no worries. What got you into wanting to pursue a career in sports media?
Hockey was just a huge passion of mine as a fan growing up, and at some point, I just figured that I always kind of wanted to, like, I'd have strong opinions about things that I'd see on the ice. And I remember initially when Vancouver was coming out of the glory days of their 2011 years, and you could sense that you were entering maybe the twilight of this core. Um, I was pretty strong in my belief that I thought the Canucks needed to embrace a rebuild instead of trying to retool things and try and make one last valiant kick at the can. And I think just from that point on, I just wanted to share my opinions, and that's how I started using Twitter. And then the way Twitter is, you're able to grow a following, and from there, that's just writing was an extension of that. And that's kind of how I started to get going. And I never really thought of it as a potential career opportunity at the beginning. I just wanted to have certain thoughts and feelings off my chest, and just to see it expand this much and this quickly, I couldn't have imagined this coming to fruition in my wildest dreams.
And I think it's interesting too, because I think, tracking your career and so many other young hockey writers, it's also sort of the growth of analytics in hockey. And I think the audience now compared to, let's say, 2010, 2011 is a lot more willing to embrace those topics, particularly in written pieces. Certainly at the Athletic, I think what you and so many other young hockey writers have done is really integrate and humanize the analytics and the statistics in your articles. Have you noticed that as well, that you're following, that your audience is has more of an appetite for analytics in your hockey analysis?
Definitely. And I think that speaks volumes to, again, just kind of the rapid progression and embracement of analytics, the type of value it holds as another tool to help in the evaluation and in analysis process. And I wrote a piece just a week ago, and I had a ton of fun doing it, where I had a 45-minute chat with Travis Green about his use of analytics. And you can see it league-wide, where teams internally, all of them use data to some extent or another. And I think you're just sort of seeing that trickle down to the public sphere, where people are recognizing just the type of value it can hold as an objective layer to your analysis. And I think back to my origins and why I became interested in using data initially, is because I would watch these games. And I remember one of my first beliefs was looking back at Chris Tanev as this defensive defenseman and thinking to myself, I watch him play every night, and the way he's able to block shots and take away passing lanes, defend the rush, move the puck. He's just an excellent two-way defenseman. But the fact that he doesn't put up a ton of points, people around the league that don't get to watch him, they don't get to appreciate his value. And I thought to myself, how do I go about explaining this to someone that doesn't watch Tanev on a day-to-day basis? And that's where analytics came. And I could say, well, when Tanev's on the ice, the Canucks allow very few high danger chances. They permit very few shots. They're out shooting and out chancing their teams. And it clicked for me there that this is a way to evaluate players that we haven't been able to do before. And just that element of being able to quantify certain elements of hockey, it appealed to me. And I think as especially diehard fans, they want to learn more. They want to do more research. They want to understand their players, the teams they support even better. They have an appetite to learn more too. And I think it's just creating a positive feedback loop that way.
So how do you become the fan of hockey, the Vancouver Canucks, to then now covering the team for the Athletic? And do you think that, have you lost a bit of that fandom in terms of covering the team, knowing that you have to now sort of be a little bit more objective than compared to your fandom days?
Absolutely. I remember I've talked to a few of the other media members from Vancouver that are in a similar situation, and they would tell me that working in media kind of does kill the fandom. And I think I've definitely experienced a lot of that myself, obviously from a standpoint of wanting to see the city have something to cheer for. I want the team to do well because of that. But as far as my personal feelings, I definitely would say that it's killed the fan in me. But it doesn't take away from how much I enjoy watching hockey. And as far as the transition to, I guess, sort of the professional side of things, it was just consistent blogging. And the fact that I think I was able to embed analytics, I was fortunate too with the timing and lucky in that sense, because there seemed to be a bit of a void, at least locally here. Canucks Army was a site that was really pioneered the use of data and numbers. And you saw a number of those writers sort of move to work for NHL teams or other positions and kind of move up the ranks. And there was a little bit of a void in the Vancouver market. And so I think I was just able to fill a niche that there was an appetite for. And because of that, I was able to grow a following. And with help from a lot of people along the way, I was able to kind of continually and get to the stage that I'm at today.
And I think what's so great about the Athletic is, especially in the NHL vertical, I've had, the chance to have Scott Burnside on the show and some other writers. And it's just, to me, what's amazing about NHL is, you're working alongside Pierre LeBrun, Scott Burnside, people who have been in the industry for a long time, but then it's given opportunities to people like yourself and Scott Wheeler in Ontario and Haley Salvian and so many others to get, their chance in the industry. So I think it's a really nice balance to have the young as well as the experience covering the sport of hockey.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned just having the veteran writers to kind of lean on. I remember when I was about to cover my first training camp, and for me, obviously, I haven't gone to journalism school. I did an internship for a company here just for a month, but that's about all the experience I had as a traditional reporter. And obviously, it was a bit of a daunting sort of leap to make that transition full time. And just to be able to, again, ahead of my first training camp, I remember Michael Russo, being able to call him up and learning so much from him, and my colleague Thomas Drance, who I really look up to, and just there's so many different people that I can lean on at the Athletic, ask for advice, and again, having that type of platform where you have this unique vertical with 30, 40, 50 writers covering the NHL, and each one of them the best on their local beat. I mean, it's an absolute privilege to have that type of knowledge base, and there's no question that I've learned so much from them, and I've picked up so many tips and tricks, and it's helped me succeed and do well in the industry thus far.
Last question for you, Harman, and I asked this to all of my guests, and you sort of alluded to it in your previous answer just about your path here. And I think with all my guests, what's so unique is everyone has a different path to get into this industry. You could go the journalism school route, you could do your route and do the blogging, but you end up in the same place. But I'm just curious for you, in talking to younger writers and journalists, what advice would you give them once they're starting out to get to the point where you're at? And how important is just the hard work and the perseverance in getting to the place where you want to get to?
No question, you nailed it. I think as far as my biggest piece of advice, it'd be find a niche and become the best at your niche, right? Like that's the biggest thing. You've got to look at the other writers in the market that you're trying to cover, and you've got to realize what each reporter is sort of like. You got to look at the coverage whole wide around, so say in Vancouver, and you've got to ask yourself, what can I do? What aspect, whether maybe it's analytics, whether it's telling the human element stories, whether it's video breakdowns, like what can you offer that maybe isn't as readily available in the mainstream media coverage? And once you find that niche, again, work on your craft, become the best at it. It took me a ton of time to become as sort of well-versed with analytics as I am today. And as you mentioned, with the hard work and perseverance, I obviously was lucky in terms of I got my break pretty quickly within a couple of years of consistently putting the time in. But there are moments where you wonder when that break is going to come. And from my perspective, I I'd be writing a lot of these articles at 2, 3 a.m. after finishing a university class. So you do need to have that. And I mean, I look at someone like JD Burke, who's now the editor-in-chief of Elite Prospects. He was blogging for 6, 7, 8 years before he had his break. And so I think the biggest thing is, beyond just finding your niche, you've got to be legitimately passionate about sports media. And it's got to be something that you enjoy doing. I know for myself, even if I didn't have a career in it, that I'd still be on Twitter, that I'd still be writing things here and there. So you really do need that passion, because it is so difficult to break into the industry, and you do need to work at it and chip away hard to finally kind of carve path in sports media.
Harman Dayal, he's the Vancouver Canucks writer for The Athletic. Harman, thanks so much for joining me today on the Weesesports Chronicles, and all the best to you the rest of the playoffs. Hope it's a long run for you.
Thanks for having me, Lucas.